Hi again, everyone. I am Chad Harberts. This is the Chad Harberts Show. We talk with all the people across the state who are involved in the thing I love the most, which is high school athletics. And we've got two great guests today. Of course, our producer extraordinaire, John Gunderson, and one of the winningest head coaches in the state in football, Tom Wilson. Coach, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Appreciate you having me on.
I know the people who are following football the last 10 or 15 years, it's going to be all the success Dowling Catholic has had. And of course, you've had a lot, but your story goes back to places that I very much appreciate, small town football, English Valleys, Dike New Hartford. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, I grew up a small town kid in Monroe, Iowa, which is PCM now, and it was only Monroe back in those days, and ended up getting my first job at English Valley. As you mentioned, I've told many people I really had no business being a head coach at that time, but I was a young guy coming in and spent 3 years there. Really enjoyed it. Great community. Then I spent 2 years at Wilton, just down the interstate towards the Quad Cities, and probably would have stayed there a lot longer, but then had the opportunity to become a graduate assistant at Ball State University. Didn't feel I could pass that up. A chance to get my master's degree and really have somebody else pay for it, and coach some college football at the same time. But then prior to going to Ball State, my wife and I got married, and then we loaded up the Ryder truck and headed to Muncie and spent 2 years there. Great experience, has been a difference maker in my career for a lot of different reasons, and wanted to come back to the state of Iowa. Really, all of my goals at that point in time were to be an elementary teacher and a head football coach, and that led me to Dike New Hartford, and spent 8 great years there. As we said prior to getting on the air, I loved every minute of it. Great community, worked for some great people, and then all of a sudden this Dowling job comes open, and wasn't a high school teacher. That's what they had open. They just wanted the weight room to get turned around, looking for a football candidate, and really didn't take the bait to begin with. I thought, no, I'm good here, and you'll find somebody that's probably a better fit. And second call, and I decided to come down and talk to him about that job, which led to a couple of different interviews. And 21 years ago, going on 22, I took the job, and then 16 years ago, I became the AD at the same time as being the head football coach, and kind of the rest is history.
And you very briefly took a different job in the Des Moines area. You were the Southeast Polk coach for just a very short time before you decided you wanted to stay in Dike a couple more years.
Yeah, for a minute was there and was never ever officially on the job, but just decided I was staying at Dike New Hartford, and it's all worked out for the best for all schools involved.
You've had some great success at Dike New Hartford. You had 3 runner-up finishes. I know the first one was like a 1-point game in 98. And then again, it was 01 and 02. I mean, that was a program that they just have the one state title, but Dike is always really pretty good. They've got some pretty good athletes, and you took them to a level they really hadn't seen before then, besides the one state title.
Yeah, I think it was 1980 they won the state championship, and it was just Dike then. And obviously, when I was there, it was Dike New Hartford, and I took over for a guy named Mark Parker. And Mark's a great, great human being, and probably did a lot of the hard work, which when you have 2 communities that come together, there's a lot of different ideas that get thrown out there. And I came in after Mark, and I think the timing was good. People were hungry. We had a decent set of athletes at that time. You get a Lane Danielson or a Gabe Baker or Bo Gibbs, and there's several others, but my timing was pretty good to turn things around fairly quickly. And it was in the second year we went to the state championship game, and the 1-point game you're talking about was a loss to West Lyon. Great ball game, came down to the last few seconds, and it may be in another 10 or 20 years I'll be over that ball game.
And then you go from there, 3 runner-up finishes. You go to Dowling Catholic, and first of all, that's a giant leap. You're moving up, 3 classes at that point? Well, probably 2 classes because there wasn't a 5A yet. So you're jumping up 2 classes. You're jumping into the Des Moines area. That's a really different situation than being in Dike, Iowa.
It is, and then you factor in the private school part of it, which I was a public school person my entire life. headed to Dowling, and it was a big jump. And ironically enough, one of the people that I was talking about all of this with was Ed Thomas. And we obviously know that story all too well, but he was somebody I was leaning on at that time to figure out if that's the best thing for me and really the best thing for my family. I had two children at that time, and later on we have Trey after we got here, but I wanted what was best for my family and our family. Monroe's about 40 minutes from here, and our family lived there. My in-laws were close by and later moved to West Des Moines, and it was as much about that as it was anything. And what I soon found out is football's football, and I know I'm a small town guy, and I was going to try to run a 4A program at the time, much like what I grew up around and what I had known for many years. And it seems like it's worked out okay.
We both know expectations in small town football are super high, but they're pretty high at Dowling Catholic too. They're competing in the best league in the state, and expectations are we need to win it all every year. Not different than when I covered Rockhurst out of Kansas City. Same kind of thing. Rockhurst was expected to win it every year, and you got to go in there pretty fast. And you had this long, 7 straight state titles. How did you get things to where you wanted them at Dowling?
Yeah, that's a broad question and a good one. But again, timing is a lot of things. And I think to start out, you need a good feeder program. And we had the Catholic Football League that has been in existence for over 50 years. Jim Williams started that way back in the day. And that league was primed and wanted leadership. And I had great sets of parents that were involved in that league and wanted to be involved, and they just wanted leadership and guidance. And that's one of the easier things that we can do. And that league started humming. The other thing, honestly, is the weight room, speed development. We really overhauled everything there. That was a lot of my background, and the reason why I got hired to begin with was to unify our strength and conditioning program. That started to take off. And I think another thing is just to change the culture of and the expectations. And as I came in as a small school guy, as I wanted multi-sport athletes, I wanted year-round strength training. I wanted all of us to be on the same page, and that doesn't happen overnight, but here it happened rather quickly, but the job is never done. It's that unification piece and getting everybody on the same page is still happening today. And that's over 21 years later. So I really think those things were really important. I think getting a quality staff in place when that wasn't going to take place overnight. There was years and years before you get it to where you want to get it. And I haven't done any of this alone. I've had great assistant coaches along the way and a lot of people doing a lot of work for us to be successful.
Well, Coach, I don't know a lot of the coach on your staff, but I know you got Coach Meeks from Columbus Catholic, who not only was the head football coach and a guy who kind of picked your brain on offensive strategies, but also was an administrator at Columbus Catholic. How big was it to bring guys like that onto your staff with those kind of skills in their background?
Oh, it's huge. That's where a friendship had started when I was at Dike New Hartford and he was at Columbus. And we talked shop quite a bit and had an awful lot in common. And we were friends, very good friends before we ever coached together. And then it got to where it looked like he was wanting to make a move. And obviously he gave me a phone call and we were able to make that work out. And I don't know if it's 10, 11, 12 years ago now that he's been on my staff. But if you look at it, I have him. I have Mike Wisner, who was at ADM. He was a head coach that coached in a state championship game. Ryan Van Veen was the head coach at Montezuma at one time. I was fortunate enough when I was up at Dike New Hartford to have Don Arusha. And then when I came down to Dowling, I had Jim Williams on my staff. And then the one person that I hired that I kind of brought with me was Andy Pollock, who I coached against him when he was playing for Coach Thomas at Applington Parkersburg. So it's just being able to get those type of people around you that believe in your mission and are willing to go to work for a cause. And as you mentioned, guys like Coach Meeks and many others have been a real important part of this.
Don Arusha was my referee teacher at Northern Iowa when I was there. I love that guy.
Yeah.
Me too. He impacted my career a great deal, but we spent a lot of time together the 8 years we were together at Dike New Hartford. And how I got him over there was a stroke of luck, but we were able to get him there and became very, very close. And obviously lost him several years ago now, but what a great man and made a great impact on a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Coach, I wanted to follow up and ask about Jim Williams. You mentioned him starting the Catholic Football League in Iowa State, Simpson College in Indianola's all-time winningest coach. I think he was coaching up until just a few years back.
Great story. Jim Williams is one of the few coaches that, and this is when he was at Simpson, he would drive around in his car, and I think he had hit every school in the state of Iowa recruiting. And it got to where he and I hit it off just talking shop as he was doing this. And so when I started interviewing for the Dowling Catholic job, I asked about Jim Williams, and they said, well, we think he's retired. And so I gave that a little bit of thought, and I thought, well, I've got one thing to at least get his interest is to talk about the Catholic Football League. So we went to Noah's Ark and had lunch. And the whole time I was thinking, if I could get this guy to be on my staff for a year or two to help mentor and coach coaches, it would be a pretty good deal. And so we sat down, and it was probably 2.5, 3 hour meeting. And it was probably the last 30 minutes I brought it to him about joining our staff. And in true Jim Williams fashion, he's going to think about very deeply about everything before he makes a commitment of anything. And we talked through a lot of things and then talked more on the phone. And lo and behold, I got him to join our staff. And he would tell the story that he thought it was going to be for a couple of years, and then he would just move on. And I think it ended up being 16, 17 years. COVID and all of that was a tough time for him. And all of us are wearing our masks and whatnot. And I'd give Coach Williams the pep talk of, hey, you got to keep this yourself covered up and those types of things. And it wouldn't be 3 minutes later that mask could be at his chin and everything else. But he was up there in years by the time he wasn't coaching anymore. And again, we lost him a few years ago. And talk about an impact. And you mentioned places that he had coached, and just very fortunate to be as close to those two guys as that I've been able to get during my career, and they've impacted me and thousands of others.
Coach, you climbed the mountaintop again last fall. That's your 9th title, correct?
Correct.
Second winningest, second most state championships in state history. Does the feeling change after so many titles, or because it's a different set of kids, is it kind of like winning it for the first time again?
Yeah, to take it back, you mentioned at Dike New Hartford, we'd lost 3 title games, and that was like a huge gorilla on my back at that time. And it wasn't anybody else applying that pressure. It was just, as a young coach, I dreamt of winning a state championship. And we were so close there at Dike New Hartford 3 different times. You mentioned the 1-point loss, and that hung with me a little bit. And one of the state championship teams that people forget is the first one. And that was in 2010. Phenomenal group of kids that we beat City High that year, who were the defending state champs. And we win that ball game in overtime. And it was a classic game in itself. And I don't know if any feeling will ever be quite like that one, because that was my first as a head coach, and it means a lot. Those kids still mean a lot. We still keep in contact with many of them, and to see what they've grown into is probably been a coach's dream. Then what everybody talks about really is the 7 in a row. Nobody ever sets out in their career thinking something like that is going to happen. And all of those are very special. But as you go on in your career, you want it so much more for the kids than you ever do your own career, to get them to experience that feeling and all the work that you put in to put yourself in position to be able to accomplish that, because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And to be honest with you, one of the best teams I've ever coached is in 2009, and we got beat in the state semifinals. So it's difficult to get to that mountaintop, and then to be able to share the state championship with these coaches. A lot of them are the same, some are different. These kids, a lot of them grew up seeing that 7 in a row when they're in elementary school and dream of doing that themselves. as a Dowling Catholic football player. And for us to be able to accomplish that was a phenomenal feeling. And again, you're just happy those kids that have never experienced it get a chance to experience it, and some of those coaches that I mentioned.
Coach, I'm a fierce advocate for high school sports. I have been for a long time. And the one thing that bothers me about the high school scene now is the outside influences seem to be getting louder and louder every year. If it's not parents, now it's going to be NIL stuff. It's going to be just all these different outside things. How have you seen the coaching, I suppose even the administrative part of this, change over your career?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. There's a lot of social media itself is a whole different world. And not all of that is bad. We as coaches, you can get a clinic any night of the week if you want to, just by things that are on social media. But there's so many things that get put in these kids' heads. Things get blown out of proportion. 6% of the high school athletes that play football get a scholarship, and that's at various levels. Then you start factoring in the few percent that get Division I scholarships, but yet when somebody invites them to camp, they think it's a big deal. And quite frankly, it's really not that big a deal. It means you're on a database.
Right.
And it's just managing those expectations that become difficult. And it's not really parents' fault. Parents are trying to do like any of us do, is what's the best for our kids. You don't know what you don't know. And just managing all of that is hard. And you were talking about the expectations for coaching at a Dowling Catholic and championships. And we really never talk about that. It's just, we honestly talk about day by day and week by week. And if we do all of those things correctly, you're going to end up with yourself being in position to win that state championship and leave a legacy. And we try to get our kids to just get tunnel vision, and it's an impossible task, but it's something that we have to try to do. And I think it's really difficult. There's individual trainers, there's people pay an awful lot of money to go to the next guru that they can have to where. When I first got here, I remember one kid telling me, well, I get my lifting in at Prairie Life, which is a local place where people go to work out, old people like me, most of them. And I just looked at him and said, how's their football team going to be this fall? Well, clearly they don't have one because it's a facility for somebody like me. But the point is, you build your team working out together. And there's a place for individual trainers. I don't fight that. They're going to go do their stuff and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we have to build a team here, and that team's going to be built together, and it's going to be done on this campus. So you have to learn to manage all of that. And it's almost an impossible task, but you just keep doing it, keep working with the people from the outside and try to get it to work to your advantage.
The other thing, Coach, in your league, the CIML, every league in the state, nobody would admit this, but there are certainly, if you're in the NICL playing football, I don't care what sport you're playing, there's probably a throwaway game or two where you know you're going to win that game. There's no throwaway games in the CIML. Every game is a monster game. And so every game, you have to get your kids up for what might be the biggest game of the season.
Yeah, it's tough. Great coaches, great athletes, phenomenal programs that have done a lot of winning. And the way things are structured in the state of Iowa right now, especially in the Class 5A, for the most part, you are the teams that have been most successful. You can count on us playing Valley, us playing Southeast Polk, us playing at least one of the Ankeneys, at least one of the Waukees, probably throw Johnston in there. And then we're going to get somebody from the eastern side of the state. And the last couple go-arounds, we've played Cedar Rapids Kennedy, who's generally a playoff team, and it's a grind. And then you're fortunate enough to make the playoffs, and you may play them again. Usually we play Valley a couple times a year, is not uncommon. But then we're going to get the Cedar Falls, the Bettendorfs, the Iowa City Liberty, the Iowa City West, and all of that. So it's week in and week out. It's a little bit survival of the fittest. One key injury here or there can make a big, big difference. So the nice thing is you get to play against great coaches with great athletes that have quality programs. And I think at the end of the day, it makes you better.
What do you think about the RPI system versus what some of the lower classes do?
Well, if you're going to criticize anything much, you better have an answer. And you look at it, and there have been years where I have questioned whether one team is better than another. I can remember a couple of years ago, Waukee Northwest didn't make the playoffs, and we played Waukee Northwest, and I think we were the number one or number two seed, and we were lucky to get out of there with a win. So I knew what kind of team they were. But their schedule was a bear and a couple of injuries, and the next thing you know, you're 4-5, 5-4, and not making the playoffs. But I think there's always going to be those one-offs. I don't care what the system is. I think by and large, it's fair. I think the Athletic Association has spent a great deal of time researching it to try to make it as fair as they possibly can. No system is ever going to be perfect. And so I learned a long time ago that I can't control that. I've got enough I can do to worry about Dowling Catholic and my team, and I'll let people debate that on online and on social media and on podcasts and things like that.
Well, Coach, I'll wrap it up with this. How does your 26 team look?
I like our team. We've got our fair share of offensive linemen back with some experience, some of very high quality. Will be new in our skill positions, but most of those kids have been in our program working and maybe had smaller roles, but now the roles are going to be bigger. Defensively, I think there's question marks. We played really, really, really good defense last year, and that was a big key to our championship. And we've got some holes to fill, but I tell people all the time, I think we're going to have a pretty good team. I just don't know if it's going to be good enough. You mentioned the schedule, and a lot of those teams that I mentioned are going to have real good football teams again this fall. And so on any given Friday, you don't know what it's going to bring. So we have high hopes, but we have our weaknesses as well.
Coach, you're the athletic director at Dowling, and so let's just talk one thing about Whiter. You've got a huge $76 million expansion going on with your gym and your student center. Can you talk about how that affects all the other sports?
Yeah, it's going to be a great thing. And $76 million, that's not tax money at Dowling Catholic. That's us privately raising all of that money. And it's the biggest campaign in the history of the diocese, if I understand that correctly. And we've put a dent in it, and we've got construction moving. But obviously, with a new arena, everybody thinks basketball, everybody thinks volleyball. But what that does is our masses are in there, our pep rallies are in there, those types of things. But it also frees up space up at the south end, like what our current gym and our current small gym. Our current gym will become multi-purpose, so I can bring netting systems in for basically baseball, softball, tennis, golf, all of those, so they can have an indoor space to practice. Our current small gym will become our weight room if everything goes according to current plans. And then we've got locker room space that we have to make. And with our enrollment growing some, we probably will have classrooms in there. And the student union, we have people that come from quite a few places to come to school here. And they might get dropped off early in the morning, and there's really not a place for them to land, and meeting space is at a premium. And we've got many different clubs. Everybody thinks sports, but we've got many different clubs that our kids are a part of. This allows them to have space to be able to conduct those and things like that. So honestly, with our entire student body, it's going to be very beneficial. I think probably the biggest thing for us is safety. Those of you that have been to Dowling, there's a lot of different doors of which you can probably get in the building. And obviously some are meant for that, some are not. But this will give us a concentrated area where people can come and check in and go through our security system and those types of things. So a lot of it is about safety as well.
Coach, 5A's become a bit of a arms race. Cedar Falls is a brand new high school. They're building the Shields Performance Center. West and East are about to unite probably a year early now to get around the whole classification mess. Cedar Rapids is probably going to reduce the school and do some new things. I mean, 5A, you kind of have to spend and keep up if you want to keep being competitive.
Well, there's no question. And honestly, you're seeing it some at even the smaller classes as well. But Dowling Catholic's never going to win the arms race. And I'm okay with that, because I think there's a blue collar mentality that can come with that. And I see a lot of nice, shiny weight rooms with a few people in it, and give me something a little less that's full, and I'll be a happy camper. So there's some pluses and some minuses that go with that. I think you're absolutely right. You look at some of these facilities and it's absolutely incredible, but we'll get the best that we can get. And it may not be the best in the state of Iowa, but we'll do what we can to maximize us.
Coach, appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you this fall with the Dowling Catholic. I know Waterloo West would like to avoid you one of these years. They keep running into you at the worst possible time, but thanks for your time and good luck this season.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.